My wife destroyed our 24-year marriage for a fantasy that lasted 6 months. She thought I'd come crawling back broken and desperate. Instead, I became someone she never expected. When I walked into our son's wedding 2 years later, her face went white. She had no idea what was coming. My name is Damon Cross. I'm 49 years old, and I own Cross Motors, a Harley-Davidson dealership in Austin, Texas. Built it from nothing with my bare hands and a dream of freedom on 2 wheels. The roar of engines, the smell of leather and chrome, that's my world. Or it was, until my world got turned upside down by the woman I thought I knew better than anyone. Bryn and I met at the University of Texas back in '98. She was studying communications. I was in business management. She had this infectious laugh that could fill a room and a way of making everyone around her feel special. We got married right after graduation, bought a little house in South Austin, and started building our life together. 2 kids followed, Knox, now 23, and Ember, 20. Everything seemed perfect on the surface. The dealership took off in the early 2000s when the Harley craze was at its peak. Weekends were filled with bike rallies, charity rides, and barbecues with our riding group. Bryn loved being part of that community. She'd dress up in her leather jacket and boots, climb on the back of my fat boy, and we'd cruise the hill country like we owned the world. Those were good times. Simple times. But success has a way of changing people. As the business grew, Bryn started wanting more. Bigger house, fancier cars, expensive vacations. She got involved with the country club crowd, started hanging around women who measure their worth in designer handbags and tennis lessons. That's when she reconnected with her old college friends, including her sorority sister Jessica Mills. Jessica had married well, to Vance Mills, some hotshot investment advisor who drove a BMW and wore suits that cost more than most people's motorcycles. They lived in one of those gated communities in West Lake Hills, the kind where everyone's lawn looks like a golf course and nobody actually talks to their neighbors. Bryn started spending more and more time over there, claiming she was helping Jessica with charity events and book club meetings. I should have paid more attention when Bryn started mentioning Vance's name. How smart he was, how successful, how he really understood the finer things in life. She'd throw little jabs about how maybe I should dress better for social events, or how other husbands took their wives on European vacations instead of motorcycle rallies in Oklahoma. The truth is, I was too busy keeping the dealership running and trying to be a good father to see what was happening right under my nose. Knox was playing college baseball at UT, and Ember was finishing up her sophomore year. Between work and family, I thought I was doing everything right. I thought we were solid. But solid marriages don't survive when one person decides they want something different. And Bryn had decided she wanted Vance Mills more than she wanted the life we'd built together. The worst part, her best friend Jessica was completely in the dark about what her husband and my wife were doing behind closed doors. The invitation came in April, one of those fancy cream-colored cards with gold lettering. University of Texas class of '98, 25-year reunion. Bryn held it up like she'd won the lottery, practically bouncing in our kitchen. "Damon, look at this," she said, waving the invitation in the air. "Can you believe it's been 25 years? We have to go." I was working on the books for the dealership, trying to figure out why our parts inventory was running higher than usual. "Sure, honey," I replied without looking up. "Sounds fun." But Bryn wasn't content with my half-hearted response. She sat down across from me at our kitchen table, that old oak piece we bought when we first moved to the bigger house. Her eyes had that sparkle they got when she was excited about something. "I wonder who'll be there," she continued, already pulling out her phone. "I should check the Facebook group. Oh my God, Jessica's going. And apparently Vance is too, since he went to UT the same years we did." That got my attention. I set down my pen and looked at her. "Vance Mills is going." "Yes. Isn't that great? It'll be like old times. The 4 of us can hang out together, catch up on everything." I nodded, but something about the way she said Vance's name bothered me. There was an eagerness there that seemed a little too intense for talking about Jessica's husband. But I shook it off. Bryn had always been the social one in our relationship. Over the next few weeks, the reunion became all she could talk about. She went shopping for a new dress, got her hair done at some expensive salon in downtown Austin, even bought new jewelry. The whole production seemed excessive for a college reunion, but Bryn insisted she wanted to look her best. "You only get one chance to show people how well you've done," she explained while trying on her third outfit option. I want everyone to see that we've been successful. The night before we left for Dallas, where the reunion was being held, I found her in our bedroom packing her suitcase. She was humming to herself, carefully folding clothes like she was preparing for a week-long vacation instead of a 2-day trip. You seem pretty excited about this thing, I observed, leaning against the doorframe. Bryn looked up and smiled. Of course I am. It's been so long since I've seen everyone. Don't you want to see how everyone turned out? I shrugged. I guess. Though honestly, most of the people I cared about keeping in touch with, I already have. She gave me one of those looks that wives give their husbands when they think they're being unnecessarily difficult. Come on, Damon. Try to have some fun with this. Who knows? Maybe you'll reconnect with some old friends too. Looking back now, I realized that was the moment I should have paid closer attention. The way she avoided eye contact when she said it, the slight flush in her cheeks, the nervous energy that seemed to radiate off her. But hindsight's always clearer than the present moment. We flew to Dallas the next morning, and I had no idea I was about to discover just how much my wife had been looking forward to seeing Vance Mills again. The reunion was held at the Omni Dallas Hotel, one of those fancy downtown places with marble floors and chandeliers that probably cost more than my first motorcycle. Bryn had insisted we get a room there instead of driving back to Austin the same night, claiming she wanted to really enjoy the experience. We walked into the ballroom around 7:30, and it was like stepping back in time. The usual reunion atmosphere, people trying to recognize faces that had aged 25 years, nervous laughter, and that awkward energy of adults trying to recapture their college glory days. Bryn grabbed my arm and steered us toward the bar. Let's get drinks and then find Jessica and Vance, she said, already scanning the room. I ordered a beer while Bryn got some fancy cocktail with a name I couldn't pronounce. That's when I spotted them across the room. Jessica Mills looked exactly like the sorority girl I remembered, just with better jewelry. And Vance, well, Vance looked like money. Expensive suit, perfect haircut, the kind of confident smile that came from never worrying about making rent. There they are. Bryn practically squealed, waving them over. The reunion hugs and small talk felt normal enough at first. Jessica was genuinely happy to see us, asking about the kids and the business. But I noticed something in the way Vance looked at Bryn, a little too long, a little too interested. Bryn, you look absolutely stunning, Vance said, taking her hand and holding it longer than necessary. Marriage to this lucky guy's been good to you. I clenched my jaw but forced a smile. She's always been beautiful, I replied, putting my arm around my wife's waist. As the evening progressed, I found myself having decent conversations with old classmates while Bryn flitted around the room like a social butterfly. But every time I looked for her, she seemed to be near Vance. They'd be laughing at some private joke, or he'd be leaning in close to whisper something in her ear. Around 10:30, I went looking for Bryn to suggest we head back to our room. That's when Tommy Rodriguez, an old fraternity brother, pulled me aside. Hey man, Tommy said, glancing around nervously. I probably shouldn't say anything, but I saw Bryn and that Vance guy heading toward the elevators about 15 minutes ago. Looked pretty cozy. My blood went cold. You sure it was them? Tommy nodded grimly. Yeah, man. Sorry. I thought you should know. I stood there for a moment, processing what he just told me. Then I walked to the elevator bank and hit the up button. I rode to our floor, the 12th, and walked down the hallway to our room. The key card beeped green, and I pushed open the door. Empty. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at Bryn's evening bag on the dresser, her shoes kicked off by the closet. My wife was somewhere in this hotel with another man, and for the first time in 24 years of marriage, I didn't know who she really was anymore. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. I sat in that hotel room chair until almost 3 in the morning, waiting for Bryn to come back. When she finally slipped through the door, try to be quiet, I was ready for her. Where have you been? I asked, my voice cutting through the darkness. She jumped, clearly not expecting me to be awake. Damon, you scared me. I couldn't sleep, so I went down to the lobby bar for a nightcap. I turned on the bedside lamp. Bryn's hair was messed up, her lipstick was gone, and her dress was wrinkled. She looked like a woman who'd been doing anything but sitting alone at a hotel bar. Tommy Rodriguez saw you and Vance getting on an elevator together, I said, standing up. Around 10:30. Her face went pale, but she tried to maintain the lie. Tommy must have been mistaken. Vance and I just talked for a few minutes about business stuff. Investment opportunities for the dealership. Investment opportunities, I repeated slowly. That took 4 hours to discuss. Bryn crossed her arms defensively. I don't appreciate being interrogated like some kind of criminal, Damon. We're at our college reunion. People talk. People catch up. That's what you do with these things. I stepped closer to her, and I could smell cologne that definitely wasn't mine. Cut the bull, Bryn. I've been married to you for 24 years. I know when you're lying. For a moment, something flickered across her face. Maybe guilt, maybe fear. But then her expression hardened into something I'd never seen before. Fine, she said, lifting her chin defiantly. Yes, I spent time with Vance tonight. Yes, we talked privately. And yes, it was wonderful to be with someone who actually appreciates me. The words hit me like a physical blow. What the hell is that supposed to mean? It means I'm tired of being taken for granted, she snapped. When's the last time you looked at me the way Vance looked at me tonight? When's the last time you made me feel special instead of just convenient? I stared at my wife, this woman I thought I knew, and realized I was looking at a stranger. So this is my fault? You cheating on me is somehow my fault. I didn't cheat on anyone, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. We just talked. We connected. Something we haven't done in years. Connected, I said bitterly. In his hotel room. For 4 hours. While your husband sat here, wondering if his marriage was falling apart. Bryn turned away from me, walking to the window, overlooking downtown Dallas. Maybe it already has fallen apart, Damon. Maybe we've just been too stubborn to admit it. I felt something break inside my chest. Not my heart, but something deeper. My faith in the life we'd built together. My trust in the woman I'd loved since college. Pack your stuff, I said quietly. We're going home. She turned around, surprised by the calm in my voice. Damon, we should talk about this. We should. There's nothing to talk about, I interrupted. You made your choice tonight. Now I'm making mine. The drive back to Austin was 3 hours of pure hell. Bryn sat in the passenger seat of my truck, alternating between attempts at conversation and wounded silence. Every few miles, she tried a different approach. Damon, I think you're overreacting, she said somewhere outside of Waco. Vance and I are old friends. We were just catching up. I kept my eyes on the road and didn't respond. You're being childish about this, she tried next. Married people are allowed to have friendships with other people. Still nothing from me. By the time we pulled into our driveway, she was angry. Fine, give me the silent treatment. But when you're ready to act like an adult, we need to discuss this rationally. I grabbed my bag from the truck bed and headed straight for my workshop behind the house. It's where I went when I needed to think, surrounded by motorcycle parts and the tools of my trade. The familiar smell of motor oil and metal helped clear my head. But this time, thinking wasn't enough. I needed answers. The next morning, while Bryn was at her yoga class, I drove to a nondescript office building downtown. The sign on the door read, Marcus Webb Investigations, a guy I'd heard about through the motorcycle community. Former Austin PD detective who'd gone private after taking early retirement. Marcus was exactly what you'd expect from an ex-cop. Mid-50s, gray hair, sharp eyes that missed nothing. His office was spartanly furnished with just the essentials. Mr. Cross, what can I do for you? He asked, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. I need to know if my wife is having an affair, I said without preamble. No point dancing around it. Marcus nodded like he'd heard this story 1,000 times before. How long have you been married? 24 years. 2 kids. I never suspected anything until this weekend. I told him about the reunion, about Vance Mills, about the 4 hours my wife disappeared. Marcus took notes on a legal pad, asking occasional questions about schedules, phone habits, and behavioral changes. Here's how this works, he said when I finished. I'll need some basic information about your wife's routine, where she goes, who she spends time with. I'll also need photos of both your wife and this Vance character. Can you get me those? Yeah, I can handle that. Good. My rate is $200 a day, plus expenses. Most cases like this take about 2 weeks to get concrete evidence one way or the other. You sure you want to know the truth? I met his gaze straight on. I need to know. That afternoon, I did something I'd never done in 24 years of marriage. I went through Bryn's phone while she was in the shower. What I found made my stomach turn. Text messages with Vance going back 3 months. Not explicitly sexual, but intimate in a way that made it clear they'd been building toward something. The most recent exchange was from that morning. Vance, Last night was incredible. When can I see you again? Bryn, soon. I need to figure things out with Dee first. Dee, that's what I'd become to my wife. Not Damon. Not her husband of 24 years. Just an initial. An obstacle to work around. I took photos of the messages with my own phone, then put hers back exactly where I'd found it. When Bryn came out of the bathroom, I was sitting on our bed like nothing had happened. I'm going to run some errands, I said casually. Need anything from town? She shook her head, not quite meeting my eyes. No, I'm good. I might meet Jessica for lunch later. Another lie. Jessica was back in Dallas. I checked her social media that morning. 3 weeks later, Marcus Webb called with news I'd been dreading and expecting in equal measure. I've got what you need, he said over the phone. But you're not going to like it. We met at a coffee shop near the university. Marcus slid a manila envelope across the table without ceremony. Inside were photographs that told the whole story. Bryn and Vance entering a hotel in Dallas. The same hotel, different dates. Receipts showing a pattern going back 6 months. It's not just emotional, Marcus said quietly. They've been meeting regularly. Always the same hotel, always when you're out of town on buying trips for the dealership. The photos were damning, but it was the timeline that really got to me. 6 months. This wasn't some spontaneous thing that happened at the reunion. They've been planning this, coordinating their schedules around my business trips. There's more, Marcus continued. The guy's married to your wife's best friend, right? Well, his wife doesn't know anything. From what I observed, she trusts them completely. I stared at the photos, feeling a cold rage building in my chest. Not just betrayed by my wife, but by someone I considered a friend. Someone whose wife trusted both of them implicitly. What's your next move? Marcus asked. I'm going to end this, I said, sliding the photos back into the envelope. Tonight. That evening, I waited for Bryn to come home from what she claimed was a charity committee meeting. When she walked through the door at 9:30, looking guilty and avoiding eye contact, I was ready for her. How was the meeting? I asked from the living room couch. Oh, it was fine, she said, hanging up her purse. Just planning the upcoming fundraiser. Pretty boring stuff. I stood up and walked to where she was standing. Funny thing about that. I called the charity office today. They said the meeting was canceled because the chairwoman is out of town. Bryn's face went pale. Maybe I got confused about which meeting. Stop lying to me, I shouted, my voice echoing through her house. I know about Vance. I know about the hotels. I know about everything. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then something shifted in her expression. The guilt disappeared, replaced by defiance. Fine, she said, crossing her arms. Yes, I've been seeing Vance. And you know what? I'm not sorry. For the first time in years, I feel alive again. The words hit me like a physical blow. Feel alive. What the hell does that mean? It means I'm tired of being married to someone who treats me like a piece of furniture, she snapped. When's the last time you looked at me like I was beautiful? When's the last time you made me feel special instead of just there? I stepped closer to her, my voice deadly calm. So this is my fault. 24 years of marriage. And it's my fault you decided to throw it all away. Maybe it is, she shot back. Maybe if you'd paid more attention to your wife instead of her motorcycles, none of this would have happened. That's when I knew our marriage was truly over. Not because of the affair, but because she felt justified in having it. That night, I didn't sleep in our bedroom. Instead, I crashed on the couch in my workshop, surrounded by the motorcycles that had always been my refuge. But even the familiar comfort of chrome and steel couldn't quiet the storm in my head. By morning, I made my decision. I wasn't going to beg, wasn't going to try counseling, wasn't going to pretend this could be fixed. When someone shows you who they really are, you believe them. And Bryn had shown me she was someone I never really knew. I walked back into the house around 7 a.m. to find her sitting at the kitchen table, still in yesterday's clothes, looking like she hadn't slept either. Damon, we need to talk, she said as I poured myself coffee. No, we don't, I replied without looking at her. We're done talking. What's that supposed to mean? I turned to face her, and she must have seen something in my expression that scared her because she actually flinched. It means I'm filing for divorce, I said calmly. And I'm leaving. Today. Her face went white. You can't be serious. Over one mistake. One mistake. I set my coffee cup down harder than necessary. Bryn, you've been planning this for months. The texts, the hotel meetings, the lies. This wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. Your choice. But we can work through this, she said, standing up and reaching for me. We have 24 years together, 2 children. I stepped back, avoiding her touch. Should have thought about that before you decided Vance Mills was worth more than our family. That's when something shifted in her expression again. The pleading stopped, replaced by cold anger. Fine, she said, crossing her arms. If that's how you want to be, then fine. But don't expect me to make this easy for you. I wouldn't dream of it, I replied. I'll be back for my things when you're not here. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door, but her voice stopped me. What am I supposed to tell the kids? I turned around one last time. Tell them the truth, Bryn. For once in your life, tell them the truth. 3 hours later, I was sitting in my lawyer's office, signing papers that would end my marriage. Alan Morrison was a straight shooter who'd handled divorces for several guys in the motorcycle community. He laid out my options without sugarcoating anything. Texas is a community property state, he explained. But given the evidence of adultery, we might be able to argue for a favorable settlement. The question is, how nasty do you want this to get? I don't want it nasty, I said. I just want it over. Fair enough. Where are you planning to live during the proceedings? That was something I've been thinking about all morning. I've got some ideas. By afternoon, I'd rented a small apartment above Murphy's garage on the east side of Austin. It wasn't much, just a studio with basic furniture and a parking spot for my bike. But it was mine, and it was honest. No lies, no pretense, just a man starting over. Knox called that evening while I was unpacking my clothes. Dad, what the hell is going on? Mom says he moved out. I sat down on the edge of my new bed, trying to figure out how to explain this to my 23-year-old son. Your mother and I are getting divorced, Knox. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. Why? What happened? I could hear the pain in his voice, and it nearly broke me. Son, that's between your mother and me. All you need to know is that this isn't your fault, and both of us love you and your sister very much. This is bullshit, Dad. You guys have been together forever. Sometimes forever isn't as long as we think it's going to be. 2 months into the separation, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I walked into Mile High Harley-Davidson on a Saturday morning and traded in my sensible pickup truck for a 2023 Street Glide Special. Matte black, with enough chrome to blind someone from 50 yards away. The salesman, a younger guy with tattoos covering both arms, grinned when he saw me looking at it. She's a beauty, isn't she? He said. You ride. Used to, I replied. Time to get back to it. What I didn't tell him was that I decided to do more than just ride. I've been talking to some of the guys who came into the dealership, guys who were part of the Iron Eagles MC, not outlaws, but serious riders who live for the road. They'd invited me on a few runs, and I'd found something I'd forgotten I was missing: brotherhood. That afternoon, I rode the new bike to the Iron Eagles clubhouse, a converted warehouse on the south side of Austin. The president, a guy called Tank who'd been riding since before I was born, looked me up and down as I climbed off the Harley. So you're the guy who owns Cross Motors, he said, extending a hand that felt like a vice grip. Used to own it with my wife, I corrected. Now it's just me. Tank nodded knowingly. Heard about your situation. Tough break, brother. It is what it is. You looking to prospect with us? I've been thinking about that question for weeks. Joining an MC wasn't something you did lightly, especially at my age. But the idea of belonging to something real, something honest, appealed to me. Maybe, I said. What would that involve? Tank smiled, and I could see why people followed him. Come inside. Let's talk. The next few months were unlike anything I'd experienced since my early 20s. Riding with the Iron Eagles meant long runs through the Texas Hill Country, charity events for veterans, and a brotherhood that didn't care about your bank account or your social status. What mattered was whether you could be trusted, whether you had your brother's backs, and whether you understood what it meant to live free. I grew my hair out, started wearing leather instead of polo shirts, and traded my clean-shaven look for a goatee. When Ember saw me for the first time after the transformation, she just stared. Dad, you look different, she said. I feel different, I replied honestly. Good different or bad different? I thought about that for a moment. Real different. The divorce proceedings moved slowly through the Texas court system, but I didn't care about the timeline anymore. I was building a new life, one that had nothing to do with a man Bryn had taken for granted for 24 years. The irony wasn't lost on me that she complained about being unappreciated while having an affair with a man who saw her as nothing more than a conquest. I'd heard through mutual friends that things with Vance weren't going as smoothly as she'd hoped. Turned out he wasn't as interested in leaving his own comfortable life as he was in playing games with someone else's. But that was her problem now, not mine. I had miles to ride and a new life to build. 2 years after I'd walked out of my marriage, life looked completely different. The divorce was finalized, the dealership was thriving under my sole ownership, and I'd found something I didn't know I was missing: peace. It was during a charity ride for wounded veterans in Fredericksburg that I met Nora Vale. She was volunteering at the rest stop, handing out water bottles and energy bars to riders. When I pulled up on my street glide, she looked at my Iron Eagles patch and smiled. "You guys have raised a lot of money for this cause," she said, handing me a bottle of water. "Thank you for what you're doing." "Thank you for volunteering," I replied. "This your first time helping with a ride?" "Actually, no. My ex-husband was military. I know how important these programs are." Something in the way she said ex-husband caught my attention. Not bitter, not angry, just matter of fact, like someone who'd moved past whatever pain had been there. Nora was 45, with auburn hair and laugh lines that spoke of someone who'd learned to find joy after hardship. She'd been divorced for 3 years after her husband came home from deployment a different man. Not abusive, just emotionally gone. They tried counseling, tried everything, but some wounds don't heal. Sometimes marriages just run their course. She explained during our first real conversation over coffee a week later. No villains, no dramatic betrayals. Just two people who grew in different directions. I admired that perspective, even though my own story had definitely included villains and betrayals. We took things slow. Nora wasn't interested in jumping into anything serious, and neither was I. But gradually, over months of motorcycle rides, barbecues with the Iron Eagles, and quiet evenings talking about everything and nothing, we built something real. She understood why I needed to completely reinvent myself after Bryn's betrayal. She didn't try to change me back into the man I'd been before. She appreciated the man I'd become. "You're more authentic now," she told me one evening as we sat on the porch of her small house in Dripping Springs. "Whatever happened to you, it stripped away all the pretense." Knox and Ember were initially skeptical about me dating someone new. They'd been hoping their mother and I might somehow work things out, despite everything. But Nora won them over with her straightforward honesty and the way she made me laugh again. "She's good for you, Dad," Ember said after meeting Nora for the first time. "You seem lighter." Meanwhile, Bryn's life had taken a different trajectory. Vance Mills had moved on to someone else within 6 months of our separation, leaving her alone in the house we'd bought together. She tried dating, but apparently, being a woman who'd blown up her marriage for a fantasy wasn't as attractive to potential partners as she'd hoped. The kids maintained a relationship with their mother, but it was strained. They'd never forgiven her for the lies, and Bryn's attempts to paint herself as the victim of an unappreciative husband fell flat with children who remembered how devoted I'd actually been. "She keeps asking about you," Knox told me during one of our regular Sunday dinners. "Wants to know if you're dating, what you're doing, whether you ever ask about her." "What do you tell her?" "That you're happy, that you've moved on, that maybe she should try doing the same." Knox's wedding to his college girlfriend Maria was set for a beautiful Saturday in October at a vineyard outside Austin. When he'd asked me to be his best man, I'd been honored and proud. When he'd mentioned that his mother would obviously be there, I'd simply nodded. Bryn and I would have to be civil for our son's sake, and I was prepared for that. What I wasn't prepared for was how confident I felt walking into that wedding with Nora on my arm. She looked stunning in a navy blue dress that complemented my charcoal suit. But more than that, she looked like she belonged there, confident, genuine, comfortable in her own skin. Everything Bryn had pretended to be, but never actually was. "You ready for this?" Nora asked as we walked toward the ceremony area. "More than ready," I replied, and I meant it. The wedding was beautiful. Knox looked handsome and nervous in his tuxedo, and Maria was radiant in her grandmother's vintage dress. I stood beside my son as he made promises I hoped he'd keep better than his parents had. But I was aware of Bryn's presence throughout the ceremony. She sat in the front row on the bride's side, wearing an expensive dress that probably cost more than most people's rent. She kept glancing over at Nora and me, her expression unreadable. After the ceremony, during the cocktail hour, the inevitable confrontation came. Bryn approached us near the bar, her smile forced and brittle. "Damon," she said, nodding politely, "you look different." I was different. 2 years of honest living, regular exercise for motorcycle riding, and genuine happiness had changed me in ways that went beyond the leather jacket and longer hair. Bryn, I replied evenly. You remember Nora Vale? Of course. How lovely to see you again, Bryn said to Nora, though they'd never actually met before. Nora smiled warmly. Congratulations on Knox's wedding. You must be very proud. I am, Bryn said, then turned back to me. I was hoping we could talk privately for a moment. I felt Nora's hand squeeze mine gently. Not possessive, just supportive. Whatever you need to say, you can say in front of Nora. Bryn's composure slipped slightly. I just wanted to say that I hope we can be civil for the children's sake. For future family events. We are being civil, I pointed out. I also wanted you to know that I've been doing some thinking about our marriage, about what went wrong. Nothing went wrong with our marriage, Bryn. I interrupted calmly. You made a choice. Multiple choices, actually, over several months. Own them. Her face flushed. I made mistakes, yes. But you weren't exactly the perfect husband either. Nora stepped slightly closer to me, a subtle show of support that didn't go unnoticed by anyone watching. You're right, I said, surprising Bryn. I wasn't perfect, but I was faithful. I was honest. And I was committed to the life we built together. That apparently wasn't enough for you. Before Bryn could respond, Knox appeared beside us, handsome in his tuxedo and clearly uncomfortable with attention. Mom, Dad, can we please not do this today? It's my wedding. You're absolutely right, son, I said, putting my arm around Nora's waist. Congratulations again. Your mother and I are both proud of you. As we walked away, I heard Ember's voice behind us, speaking to her mother in a tone that was polite but firm. Mom, he's moved on. Maybe you should too. 2 years ago, she betrayed me and destroyed our family for a fantasy that lasted 6 months. Now I walked into our son's wedding with a woman who appreciated the man I'd become, while she sat alone, still trying to justify choices that had cost her everything. I'd never planned on revenge, but sometimes the best revenge is simply living well,